Hello. How's everybody? Hello. I'm Kristen. I'm the director of the Island Free Library on Block Island. I am at the Island Free Library on Block Island right now. Hope you can hear me. It says my microphone isn't great. I think you can probably hear me though, right? Can you hear me? There we go. Trying to get you a little closer. I'm in a different room. I'm actually in the front hallway. That's a nice background. I should have had that. But then my friend LT tells me, don't sit in front of a window. We can't see you. So here I am. Your LT, if you're listening, that is definitely what you said to me. So here I am. A Frankenstein Tea is a daily program from the Island Free Library with me. It's live most days. It is live today. It is 3:03 on my computer clock here, and it is the last day of July for 2020, 7/31/2020. Last day of July, August 1st tomorrow. You know, it's generally how it works. Last day of the month, the next month starts the next day. Here we go. August coming at us right here tomorrow. August. July is done, almost done. I don't want to jinx anybody, but we're done. It's Friday afternoon, and I just gold the staff to be done when I was done with my story. Let's get out of here for a couple breaths. We are open tomorrow for outside library service from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., both at the front door and at the kids' garden takeout window. Come get what you need. Come say hi. If you come say hi, it's not a long visit. We're definitely following social distance rules and not visiting with people long, but we're here, and you can come, ask us about what we're reading and what we're watching. We had a big discussion about a movie that I took home last night that some of the staff had seen. Never Look Back, a foreign film Academy Award nomination. I don't think it won, but it was nominated. Great film, great film. We had a good time talking about that today. So who knows what we'll be talking about tomorrow or what we'll be doing. But we'll be here. So if you need something to read or watch or printed or scanned, copy, faxed, emailed, notarized, we can help you get that done tomorrow. You can do some of that work in advance by sending us your print, copy, scan, fax, email, notary job or book or material requests to islandfreelibrary@gmail.com. We check that Gmail account throughout the day. We print what you need printed. We get your materials checked out to you. We'll send you an email back that says you are all set at the front door and ready for pickup. Or you can come and do that while we're open, whatever works for you. I'm trying to show you. Yeah, so here's an example. Like this print job is ready for pickup tomorrow. This was a huge laminating job that we did for the beach house, ready for pickup tomorrow. There's books down there ready for pickup. Anyway, we're making it happen here at the library. And if you have any questions about that, you can call us, check our website, listen to me every day, rattle on about what we're doing. Your choice. But we're closed Sundays and Mondays. I do this program, Frankenstein Tea, Sundays and Mondays. And I have something really good that I'm excited to read already. I ordered new textbooks for my son's fall semester, and they've come in, and I'm going to read something out of one of them. Pretty excited about it. And I'm going to read today. So let me get to that. I'm going to have a sip of tea. Rain today. Yay, Block Island. We got some rain. Makes me feel like I can drink hot tea. I'm going to read today something by Craig Johnson. This book is Wait for Signs. It says 12 Longmire stories. Craig Johnson, Wait for Signs, 12 Longmire stories. I love Longmire. I'm a little bit of a Western head when it comes, not so much books, but I love them in films and Netflix series. And Longmire was one of my favorites. I loved that on Netflix. If you haven't done that yet, you can do it. But I would say that I'm often hesitant about Westerns and the dialogue of Westerns and the language of Westerns, the premises of that single story, that cowboy story, that story that we repeat and tell ourselves about indigenous people and language that we use for them. So I'm sensitive to that. It's part of our, um, removing racism from our institution here at the library, and how we talk about that and what's on our shelf. And, so I'm sensitive to that. And yet I enjoy them. So, that's my personal journey as well as my professional journey. But I think I like today's. I do. I read it. I like it. And I think you'll enjoy it. So I'm going to read it to you. But I would say, as much as I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, I won't be able to say all of these words correctly. Some are Spanish from Spain. Some are maybe Chilean. I'm not even sure what's happening. So my apologies for my accent and my lack of learning that language. That's not a language that I ever studied, any sort of Spanish dialect. So I'm going to start with an apology. But I think I can do most of it. So I'm going to start. This is Craig Johnson, Wait for Signs. This is a book that was published, published by Viking in 2014. This is Louis L'Amour. This is the title page here. Too often I would hear men boast of the miles covered that day, rarely of what they had seen. Louis L'Amour. Petunia, Bandit Queen of the Bighorns, by Craig Johnson. Static. He's disconsolate and won't stop crying. I stared at the radio under my dash and then keyed the mic. So, what do you want us to do about it? Static. Well, you're the one with the Basque deputy. The guy's Basque? Static. Yeah. I tried not to get involved with the National Forest Service, the Rangers, or anything happening in the federal jurisdiction when I didn't have to. But it was looking more and more like I was going to have to. And as usual, it would be Chuck Kuhn who got me into it. I keyed the mic and peeked at Dog in the rearview mirror. Well, fortunately for you, I've got two of my faithful companions with me. I glanced over at Santiago Sazaburitoria. You up for it? The dark-eyed young man looked out at the Bighorn Mountain scenery speeding by under the clear blue sky of the stunning spring afternoon. Sure. What's the Basque phrase for people who leave their country? I steered the Bullet past Crazy Woman Canyon and took the Hazelton Road south toward Upper Doyle Creek, where the grazing land adjoined the property owned by the feds. Sancho's wife, Maria, and son, Antonio, were visiting family down in Rawlins, and I got the idea that he was missing them more than he wanted to let on. You don't really seem enthused. He chose his next words carefully, not being a big one for airing his slightly soiled laundry with his coworkers. When she was alive, did you and your wife fight a lot? Sometimes, I glanced at him. You and Maria? Yeah. About what? He blew his breath out between his teeth. She got a dog. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the beast in the back. I thought you liked dogs. I do, but she went to the pound and got a border collie blue heeler puppy. And you know how they are if you don't have something for them to do. I grunted. You got any furniture left? a few sticks, but he's turned his attention to the woodwork in the rented house, and it's taking a beating. Sancho gazed out the window and dropped the Basque term for their expatriates. Diaspora. That's it. I watched him for a while longer. You thinking about running away and becoming a shepherd? He didn't laugh, and I figured that maybe I better redirect the conversation. You know, the government effectively cut off immigration to Basques in 1921 with the National Origins Quota Act. Why did they do that? I shrugged. Too many Basques, I guess. And you know what that leads to? His eyes shifted toward me. What? Harmonized singing, synchronized dancing, drinking, and general joyous humanity. He bent his mouth in a tight-lipped smile. Well, we don't want that, do we? Nope. But a senator over in Nevada, McCarran, opened it back up with the Immigration Act of 1952, allowing a quota of 500 for Spanish shepherders. I wonder what he had against the French. I pulled the truck off the gravel road through an open gate onto the sparse two-track, then slid to a stop and reached back to scratch the fur behind Dog's ears. Of course, now they enter the country under the H-2A Temporary Agricultural Workers Program that lets companies hire foreigners for jobs Americans won't do. Much more pedantic sounding. Do you really sit around and memorize that stuff? He looked at me, unsure as to why I'd stopped the truck. Would you get out and shut that gate? Evidently, Ranger Coon wasn't brought up in a ranching family. He did as I asked, then hopped back in. I pulled out, lecturing him a little more on his culture. You know, those guys have one of the highest suicide rates of any occupation, right? Senators? Shepherds. He continued to stare at the lonely hills, still wearing a dusting of early spring snow. Thinking I could get him to feel better about his own situation, I continued. The poor Buragueros are out here in the middle of nowhere most of the year, getting paid $650 a month, living in a 5-foot by 10-foot camper without running water, a toilet, or electricity. I took a breath. I'd imagine it gets tough. We drove along, and he still said nothing. It borders on total social isolation. Finally, he pulled the bill of his ball cap over his eyes and leaned back in his seat. Sounds pretty good to me right now. We pulled to a stop near a stand of lodgepole pines beside Coon's mint green Forest Service Jeep. Looking through the windshield of my truck, I could see a battered sheep wagon, a sad-looking sorrel gelding, about 100 sheep, and the gray-shirted ranger standing over a man with his face in his hands and a bolt-action .22 lying across his thighs. Thinking it best not to tempt Dog with the 100 sheep, we cracked the window and left him in the truck and approached the two men. Coon waved and stepped aside, happy to hand over the sensitive situation. The sheepherder looked young, but the burnished skin of his hands and face bore testament to many an hour spent out in the elements. Santiago stepped ahead of me and kneeled down to the man seated on the steps of the wagon, gently took the rifle away and handed it to me. I pulled the bolt action and caught the diminutive round as it popped out. Queixo. The man had been crying and wiped the remainder of his tears away with the sleeve of his shirt as Saza Baritoria bumped the suntanned man's shoulder with the back of his hand in a comradely manner to get his attention. Potsa nerzu escazerto, zer moduz? The man didn't respond and sat there looking at him blankly. Nola duza enzenza? Finally, the man grunted a response. Okay? Sancho stared at him. Barcata? Bel aduzas and sacaras? He shook his head. Que? The Bosco's face dropped into the palm of one hand. The next words mumbled through his fingers. Hablo español? The man immediately straightened and smiled. Sí, rattling off a monologue far faster than I could understand with my high school Spanish. He and Sancho talked for a while. In a lull, my deputy glanced up. His name is Jose Vargas, and he's from Chile. We both looked at Kuhn, who folded his arms. Well, I didn't know what he was talking about. He's in a sheep wagon and herding sheep, so I figured he was Basque. At least at a loss for anything else to say, he changed tack. When I pulled up here, he was sitting there crying, and I couldn't get out of him what the problem was, so I called you guys. I glanced at the man and then to Sancho. Did he tell you what was the matter? There was another flurry of Spanish as the swarthy man gestured toward an older sheep with a unique fleece that we hadn't noticed before, tied to the wheel of the wagon, a lamb staying nearby. The Bosco listened intently, hiding a grin and trying to repress the humor of the situation. Finally standing and placing his hands on his hips and looking at us. Evidently, we are in the presence of royalty. Kuhn looked down at the sad man. What? He's the Prince of Chile? If my translation is on the mark, it's not him. Sazaburito Batoria smiled and swept off his hat in mock respect, gesturing toward the sheep tied to the wagon who now bleated at us. It's her, he laughed. Gentlemen, may I introduce Petunia, bandit queen of the Bighorns. The ranger was the first to respond. You're shitting me. That's the you that launched 1,000 strays? I glanced past the men at the sheep with the florid fleece. Well, I'll be. Sancho looked at all three of us as if we were crazy. If it's not too much to ask, who the hell is Petunia, bandit queen of the Bighorns? The saga was an odd one in the storied past of Sheridan, Bighorn, Washakie, and Absaroka counties. A detailed tale that I'd heard from Vic Garber, the original and present owner of Petunia, and told it as best I knew. When you are running flocks as large as a couple thousand on rough range, you have to have what they call in the business markers, so that the herders can get a rough count. You have one for each 100 head of stock. Well, about 5 years ago on the Garber Ranch near Sheridan, you foaled a lamb with a somewhat unique wool pattern that for all intents and purposes resembled a flowering petunia. Hence, the legend was born. Sazabitoria waited patiently and then looked at me dubiously. She's famous in 4 counties because she looks like a petunia? Petunia and her mother went to summer pasture in the mountains and then returned to the Garber place. And since Petunia was a good-sized ewe and had a distinctive pattern, Garber kept her as a marker. Paul Miller was Vic's top herder at that time, and he made sure that Petunia, being such a stunning sheep, was bred. She had a lamb, although not as distinctive as she was. Well, as these things sometimes happen with cattle or sheep, Petunia hated her lamb. So she was given the usual treatment until she accepted the baby. She went up to the Bighorns that summer with her lamb, and things were fine. I paused to catch my breath. Well, the second year Miller bred Petunia, she had her lamb and loved it, so was sent to the mountains again. Along toward the end of August, Garber was up checking on his camp when Paul told him that Petunia was gone a couple of nights that week, but was back now. Garber, a tough old hand and a shrewd businessman, knew that a rogue sheep could lead a lot of the others astray. So he told Miller that if she was a bunch quitter, to shoot her. Sazabitoria looked at me in horror. Shoot the sheep? I nodded my head. Miller pretty much had the same response and said, "Oh, I couldn't do that. What about the lamb?" Garber knew that Miller and the flock of sheep were up there to around 9 or 10,000 feet. So he tells him to butcher the lamb and to stick what he can't eat into a snowbank and says he'll take the rest home the next time he comes up. Sancho glanced at Coon. He killed the lamb? Chuck shook his head. I haven't heard the whole story. They both turned back to me, and I stuffed my hands into my jeans. Well, the next time Garber goes up there, Paul tells him that before he could shoot her, Petunia lit out and that she had taken a bunch of sheep with her when she left. So Garber tells him that the next time he sees her, he's to shoot the damn sheep on sight. Well, Miller doesn't want to do it, but Garber tells him that they'll lose the whole flock before she's through, so shoot her. It was possible that the Chilean shepherd, Vargas, knew a little English because he was now listening intently. Vic gets home that night, and Tom Koltsika from down here in Absaroka County calls him up and tells him that he's got a sheep with Garber's brand on it, a marker with an unusual pattern in her wool, and that he's at a loss to describe it. Whereupon Garber mutters into the phone, Petunia. Tom yells, "That's her." Coon began laughing. Garber tells him, "Tom, do me a favor and shoot her." Well, Tom tells him that he doesn't want to do that and says, "What about the lamb?" Garber tells him to butcher the lamb and to have dinner on him. But Tom says that he hates that thought. And by the way, she came with more than a truckload of Garber's outlaw strays. So they make arrangements for him to go down there and pick them up. Garber thinking that he would take Petunia's fate into his own hands. He is there the next morning, bright and early, but the first thing Tom says is that Petunia's gone again, but not to worry because she and her lamb are on Chip Lawrence's place near Ten Sleep, and they'll bring her over at noon. Cesar Vittoria shook his head. That's over 60 miles. The pickup shows at around 12, and Garber says he can tell by the way the guys are behaving that they're a little apprehensive. The foreman comes over and introduces himself and tells Vic that the damned marker of his must have a sixth sense and has gotten away again. Chuck was still laughing. Garber tells him that if they ever lay eyes on her, that they are to shoot her on sight. But the head guy says he doesn't want to do that. Vic tells him that the damn sheep has already gotten 3 different ranchers in trouble, so shoot her. Well, the men ask about the lamb, and Garber tells them to eat it. Later that year in December, Tommy Wayman and one of his men were rewiring some of their sheds over in Bighorn County up near Shell, and guess who shows up? Sancho asked. Did they call Garber? They did. And she got away again? Yep. I glanced past the men at the sheep, who was looking innocent enough tied to the wagon wheel with her lamb nearby. Gentlemen, in 6 years, that sheep has covered the entire Bighorn mountain range, who knows how many times. We all had a laugh, and then the Bosco glanced down at Jose and rattled off a few words of Spanish. The shepherd responded, and then his eyes welled up again. Sancho smiled and patted the man's shoulder. He says he radioed into the rancher who contacted Garber, and, well, you can guess what the verdict is. I looked at the 22 in my hands, thinking about the plan that I had just formulated and how I was going to play this. Jose spoke some more, and Sancho translated. He says that all the shepherds on the mountain know her and love her, that she's a legend, and he doesn't want to be the one to do it. I glanced at Kuhn, but he backed away. Oh, no, not me, not my responsibility. Carefully returning the small round into the bolt action, I slid the mechanism home and stood there like Tom Horn, judge and executioner, aware that if I overdid it, I was going to have to shoot a sheep and worse, her lamb. No, boss, really. I spoke with my most resolute voice. It's got to be done. She's costing these ranchers money and time that they don't have. Putting on my most reluctant performance, I started to walk around him, but he held up an arm. What about the lamb? It'll have to go too. I gestured toward Vargas and walked the fine line of overkill. Ask him if he's got any more ammunition for the 22. I'd hate to use my 45 on a lamb. Sazabatoria stood there, looking at me. It didn't take long for Chuck and me to safely tie both Petunia and her lamb to the hold-down eyelets in the bed of my truck, as the Bosco carried on a conversation with the shepherd and then joined us at the Bullet. He says he won't take any money, but I'll just run him up some groceries and a bottle of red wine next week. Chuck looked at him. You better keep the bandit queen locked up tight, or every rancher in Wyoming is going to be after you, especially Garber. Santiago walked over to the truck and pulled the wool back away from the sheep's eyes. And I could pretty well figure that there was some kind of connection going on between the aged ewe and the genetic coding in the Bosco. Maybe her wandering days are over. We've got almost an acre behind the house that's fenced. Sazar Batoria and I climbed into the Bullet and waved goodbye, turning back into the dirt two-track, slowly descending out of the high pasture. Sancho threw an arm over the seat and looked past Dog into the bed. At least that damn puppy of ours will have something to do now. I drove the entire 40 miles without cracking a smile. A personal best. That was Craig Johnson, a Longmire story from Wait for Signs. That story was Petunia, bandit queen of the Bighorns. Thanks for coming to Frankenstein Tea. I hope you enjoyed today's selection. If not, there's others. I think there's over 90. I think I'll have to have some little celebration when I get to 100 stories. I'm close to 100. Next week, we'll be at 100 stories that I've recorded. We'll do some sort of celebration then. But so if you didn't like today's, there's others to listen to. I try to diversify the styles and the genres and the genders of the authors and the countries they come from. And, so that was a Western for today. I'll see you tomorrow at 3:00. Have a great afternoon, Block Island and beyond. Be safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, and keep your social distance at 6 feet. Peace.